first of all, to open their arms to the refugees coming from Syria, and now decided to temporarily close the border?
Thank you for this invitation. Let me say that there are various reasons for the stance of Germany at the beginning. First of all, it is the history of the country which plays a role for that kind of humanitarian decisions. Second, it is the industry of Germany which might require personnel such as the one which can be offered by Syrian refugees. And third, it is the negative image of Germany in Europe right now, which Chancellor Angela Merkel is trying to improve by that kind of initiatives. But at the same time, Germany alone is not able to solve the problem, and that is why it decided to close its borders with Austria. We have to wait and see what can happen at the European level, not only today, but also in the next days, if no agreement will be reached today. But I'm not optimistic that a solution will be found at the European level.
Okay. Ms. He, here in Beijing, you have been an expert of African countries and also Middle East. Let me ask you this, because one of the things we've already mentioned by our guest in Athens is about, from the European perspective, why they closed the border. But one interesting issue, an important one, is about the IS. There has been media reports talking about the Islamic State infiltrate into the refugees coming from Syria into Germany, and that has caused a lot of security concerns. So that leads us to the question, ma'am, which is, was it a premature decision for Germany to make at the very beginning to embrace the refugees as much as it can? Hasn't it really thought about the possibility of, for example, terrorism and other kinds of unstable factors?
Well, I think from this sudden decision change, I think it's quite obviously that German government hasn't thought too much those negative impact coming from this flooding of those refugees. So I think that maybe at the very beginning they are thinking too much about those leadership of Germany among this EU, especially when EU now are facing like economic crisis and also other challenges in the Ukraine. So all those challenges. So they couldn't see those possibility like this integrated of EU. So they have to stand up as the very responsible one. And secondly, they also think, oh, okay, like our colleagues mentioned, this can also help for to resolve this shortage of skilled workers in
But then
Germany.
How much danger? I don't want you to repeat the talking points of the others, but how much danger really is there for the refugees when they come into a country? Also come inflows of possibility of terrorism and many other unstabilizing factors, crimes, for example.
Yes, right. Because during these several days, and then lots of issues has been happening even in Germany. Because some refugees, they are not a pure refugee. Some veterans has flashed out, and some refugees, they used to be even IS fighters. So this caused a lot of new concern for this security and also national integration within this Germany. So Merkel government now coming from a lot of attack coming from other parties, because this is a coalition government. So he have to respond, because at the very beginning it's just open up the door.
That's right. We have seen the change, but then, Mr. Zokopoulos, are these cases, as we mentioned earlier, sporadic cases? Should there be enough reasons to prevent the earlier policy from being implemented? How should we weigh the pros and cons? I think it's an ultimate question, but we really have to face it now daily.
Well, Greece and Italy are currently being encountered with a humanitarian crisis, and I think that the attention should first be directed towards the tragedy in the open seas, in the Aegean and the Mediterranean, where many refugees are losing their life every day. Apart from that, then we can see how these people, especially the refugees from Syria, might be better integrated in the societies of northern European countries where these people want to go. In my view, the term solidarity in Europe seems to have lost its main meaning, because many European countries do not want to help right now Greece and Italy and help part and attract part of the refugees which first come to these two countries. In my view, President Juncker and also other European leaders should put pressure towards this direction, because otherwise the problem will not be solved, and we will talk all the time about the humanitarian dimension of the problem.
Mr. Jeffrey, you've been listening to our two guests. I want you to have also your input. It seems as things develop, priorities for countries inside the EU has also been changing. Earlier, it was about humanitarian side. And now there's also a shift to the national security, as Germany has indicated, and also about the European solidarity. What is your observation coming from Washington about the priority shifts and the most urgently needed task?
The priority shift simply reflects reality. We have a refugee crisis that is based upon a long-standing situation in the Middle East that has gotten far worse. Mass violence by the Assad regime and ISIS, the terrorist group. Secondly, a failure by the international community, beginning with us and the Security Council, China, America, other countries, to do something effective about it. That's created millions of refugees from Syria, Iraq. Then you have the European Union foolishly throwing away its own what are known as Belfast criteria for dealing with refugees or migrants, and essentially opening the doors to what amounts to mass migration. Angela Merkel said 800,000 people could be taken just this year, and her government says up to 500,000 in out years. This would be like China taking 16 million refugees from the Middle East in the next few months, and up to 10 million a year into the future. No country and no set of countries can absorb this number of people so quickly, and there is tremendous popular opposition to what Merkel has done, not only in the rest of Europe, but also increasingly in Germany.
Well, then, Mr. Jeffrey, what are you suggesting? It sounds like you are suggesting, no, these countries just don't have the capability of absorbing all of these refugees. Then what's going to happen to the humanitarian side of this issue? I'm talking about a balance, not just pointing fingers, but how to seek a solution. What is the solution to you?
The short-term solution is, and Britain has done far more than the United States in this regard, is to very generously support the UNHCR, the UN Refugee Agency, in the camps in Turkey, Jordan, Lebanon, and Iraq, where over 4 million people are residing right now. Ensure that they're humane, that those people are well protected, they're given temporary housing, they're given obviously food and water and medical care, and then fix the underlying problems in Syria and in Iraq.
Mr. Zougopoulos, is that a viable plan?
Well, it might be a viable plan, but again, the problem after the humanitarian dimension of the problem will be dealt with is how these people can be integrated in the European society. And as far as we know right now, there are many European countries which do not want to accept the refugees. So if this will not change, then the problem will deteriorate in the near future. Of course, we should also focus on the aspect of foreign policy, because what we need is stability in the Middle East, and particularly in Syria, and after to talk about migration. This is where the attention of the international community, including the United States and the European Union, should concentrate, especially with cooperating with Russia and also China.
All right, very interesting point. I'm going to pick that up. But first of all, Ms. He, what about the three things all at the same time? Humanitarian crisis that you can deal with both with the international organizations and also these European countries absorbing some of these refugees. And secondly, of course, it's the next step. How can these refugees settling down in the society they have chosen or the country they have chosen? And thirdly, of course, is the foreign policy issue. Can we do the three all at the same time? Do we have a mechanism established in order to deal with that?
I think it's the thing we must do. It's not the things say can we do or can or cannot do. Right. We must do. So because all those refugees, they are caused by those civil conflicts, because those war in Syria, because those war in Iraq, so they have nothing to go, nowhere to go. So for my understanding, I think two ends of things should be handled. One is in the European country, even including the United States, they have to relocate those refugees because this is their responsibility. So they have to, especially in European countries, they have to build a very unified those policy, like a quota sharing. Different countries,
right.
They have different quota based on their own GDP or their own economic capacity. So, but to the other end, that is the crisis, the civil war in Syria. How to resolve this civil war has been there for 4 years. Now we haven't seen the things goes to a good direction, rather than now go to the worst direction, because we have heard too much about now this country, that country now is going to send the troops in,
right.
or some heavy weapons in.
You think that will be the solution or not?
I don't think so at all.
Why not?
Because if you send the troops in or send those heavy weapons in, which means that the war is going to be expanded or
right.
even upgraded. And then that's why those refugees, they feel so scared for, they're frightened. They think the war is becoming
right.
more fierce.
I see your point. And Mr. Jeffrey, the United States was very vocal in so-called toppling down the Assad regime. And yet, we see, since the military actions being taken in Syria, what has happened as a result as things evolve. You could argue whether it's a direct result or indirect result, but things are getting ever more complicated and chaotic. And IS is taking advantage of this vacuum of power. And it seems that the opposition to the government has not been doing their job in terms of cracking down on the terrorism front. And people are leaving the country by millions. So does that make us think about what the foreign policy should be? Does that make us think about whether foreign interference is a good idea at all, Mr. Jeffrey?
Well, first of all, the non-Islamic terrorist opposition in Syria has done more to fight IS than the Syrian government itself has. The Syrian government typically has avoided fighting IS unless absolutely necessary. It's not the answer to IS. The United States has done nothing against the Assad government. We could go into the many reasons for that, but until it becomes clear to Assad's only supporters, not the people of Syria in their overwhelming majority, but Russia and Iran, that Assad can never govern the country, that the opposition to him from across the board is too strong, unless that becomes clear, and that will require more American action, we're not going to get a negotiated result that will calm the situation and allow everybody to fight against IS, which is the second step. First step is finding a government that is acceptable to the people of Syria. The current one is not.